We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder.
It is finally official. Murder is legal in the state of California.
The jury found him innocent, but 150 million people watched that trial, and most came to a different conclusion. From his Bronco chase heading to the border with cash in a disguise, to a literal trail of blood from the murder scene to his bedroom, the evidence was overwhelming. To the vast majority of the country, OJ got away with murder. But OJ had things that you and I didn't. He was famous, rich, and had a racial get-out-of-jail card by a jury who didn't trust the LAPD at all. These days, getting away with murder should be almost impossible. Security cameras on every corner, cell phone tracking, facial recognition, DNA analysis, license plate readers. The cops have an arsenal of high-tech tools that they've never had in history. But the numbers tell a completely different story. Getting away with murder has never been easier. In fact, the percentage of people even arrested for a murder on the books has never been lower. And this may sound unbelievable, but it's absolutely true. Each year in the US, about 13,000 people kill someone and never go to prison. That's 36 OJs every day. We'll dig into those numbers, which are still a bit of a mystery to the experts. And we'll learn that, like everything else in life, justice isn't equal. Some murders are much more likely to be solved than others. The data show that for decades, the clearance rate of murders in the United States has steadily dropped. In 1962, 93% of homicides were cleared, meaning an arrest was made or the suspect was known but couldn't be prosecuted because he was dead or had fled to another country. Fast forward to now, and that clearance rate has plummeted to just 52%. That's a drop of almost half just during my lifetime. Even discounting the 1960s numbers, when some departments claimed 100% clearance rates, criminologists confirm that the Great Decline is real. And just because someone's arrested doesn't mean they're convicted. In fact, only 70% of murder trials end in a guilty verdict. Now, plea deals muddy up some of those stats a bit, but it still means that between 35 and 45% of murderers get punished at all. Getting away with murder isn't some outlier. It's the norm. And the US averages over 23,000 murders a year, so conservatively, that's 13,000 killers walking free each year. So what's behind the great decline in solving murders? Well, the overall stats don't tell the whole story. To understand why so many killers walk free, we first need to look at some disturbing truths about race. And this is one of the worst. If you're black in America, you're about 600% more likely to be murdered than any other race. Now, those are nightmare numbers, but even worse, the odds that your killer gets caught are even lower. Now, to some, that's evidence of a racist system that doesn't care about black lives. But the reality is a bit more complex.
Wouldn't have happened if she was white, though. They would have had the whole fucking police force out looking for a white ass.
That's a charge that's hard to quantify. On one hand, when police really want to solve a murder, they usually do. But if you look at Chicago, for example, it has more murders than any city in the country. And there, the top brass is mostly black. The mayor, the prosecutor, the police chief. And their clearance numbers are among the very worst in the country. Nationally, one stat jumps out. The toughest homicides to solve, by far, black victims shot to death. Nationwide, fewer than 30% of those cases get cleared. It's substantially lower than blacks who are murdered in some other way, or victims of any other race. Two factors may be at play here. One is that, despite ballistics, if someone gets shot with a gun, the killer is less likely to get caught, and I'll get into that in a little bit later. Another factor is that in many neighborhoods there's a distrust of police and a culture of silence. The former Oakland deputy police chief laid it out. People don't want to cooperate. People don't want to come to court and testify. And they're afraid of retaliation and of being labeled in their communities as a snitch. In gang-ridden neighborhoods, the clearance rates are rock bottom. Picture a drive-by shooting where no one talks to the cops. That's almost impossible to solve. But the overall stats vary widely. Now let's look into the statistics of who gets caught and who walks. How do you not get caught for murder? First things first. If you don't want to get caught for murder, don't murder anyone. Okay. Beyond that, sometimes the where matters. So it's especially important not to kill anyone in a small town. It freaks them out more, and those get solved more often. How people are killed matters as well. Definitely don't use a knife, a bat, or your hands, because gun murders get unsolved more often than others. That's partially because of less DNA evidence, but there's also a big correlation between gun use and the killer's relationship to the victim. And as it turns out, that's the one factor that trumps all others when it comes to solving murders: the victim's identity. So good first advice, don't kill a celebrity or a big shot. Those murders almost always get solved. solved. Okay, we'll talk about that one in another video. Another pro tip, don't turn your victim into a household name. Outside of some local press, most murders don't make the news because there's almost 60 of them every day. But if it's a pregnant woman killed on Christmas Eve, that's going viral, and that's getting solved. Here's another big one. Never murder someone you know. People who kill strangers have a much better chance of getting away with their crime.
Each fellow does the other fellow's murder, then there's nothing to connect them. Each one has murdered a total stranger.
A lot of murders are no mystery. The killer is sitting next to his dead wife or friend when the cops show up. Even if it's not that obvious, cops first look to people close to the victims. I had a very close family member murdered by an absolute stranger when she was out on a hike. Police questioned everyone she knew, but if the killer hadn't blabbed about it, he never would have gotten caught. And that takes me to the last point to make about victims. It's that sympathy matters. The hard truth is that a lot of murder victims were doing something they shouldn't have been doing. If you get whacked because you're a drug dealer and you shorted your boss's stash, police and prosecutors aren't going to lose too much sleep over that. But the murders of children or women are solved much more often than others. The criminal justice system is made up of people, and heart-wrenching crimes get more attention. But it's not just cops and prosecutors dropping the ball. Juries have changed as well. Our standards have changed in America. One change? They call it the CSI effect, and it's real. On TV, cops solve crimes in an hour, and there's always a lot of DNA evidence and carpet fibers and all of that. And it warps what people expect from real-world evidence. Jurors want smoking guns, hard evidence, DNA. Anything less, and they get squeamish about convicting. And many prosecutors would rather not even go to trial than to lose a trial. The justice system overall has shifted too.
I want a kinder and gentler nation.
The legal rules for evidence have tightened, and we have more protections than ever for defendants. This higher bar means that many murders technically go unsolved, even when detectives have a pretty good idea who did it. Without slam dunk evidence, suspects walk free. Of course, no one wants to send an innocent person to prison. It's a central tenet to our entire culture. Heck, the concept of wrongfully accused men is a whole movie genre. It's good that we have a high standard for locking people in cages. A question is it too high? Have we overcorrected to the point where we're letting too many killers off the hook? It's a difficult question we need to wrestle with. There's 250,000 murders gathering dust in file cabinets, 250,000 victims and their families who never saw justice. For them, the system is failing. Now, I'm not saying I have all the answers. I certainly don't, but I know this much. Getting away with murder has never been easier, and that should scare the heck out of us all. I'm Ken LaCorte. I gave this to you as straight as I could, and I hope it was worth your time. I linked to a lot of my sources below, and if I messed up any of the facts, I'll put them in a pinned comment. Subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I hope you come back again.